Let me tell you a story. An unknown marketing consultant put everything that he knew about his work into a book. Now, this book was spotted by someone influential who happened to offer him a TED Talk. And this TED Talk ended up getting 50 million views, making him a global phenomenon that we know as Simon Sinek. And his book, Start With Why. Robert Kiyosaki has built businesses worth over $80 million, all because of the success of his book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Similarly, Seth Godin, Mark Manson, James Clear, as well as Robin Sharma have built massive personalities as well as businesses, all because of the successes of their books. And they wrote books not because they wanted to be authors, but because in this fast world of short videos and social media, all of this online content barely registers in your memory. In this clutter, a book becomes a wonderful way for you to actually leave a mark on the minds of the readers. Which is why a book is one of the best business cards that you can build for yourself. And to understand everything about how people today are using books to build their personal brand, I thought of meeting with my friend Gaurav, who happens to be the CEO of Penguin Random House India. He's worked with the organization for over 2 decades across New York, China, Hong Kong, Dubai, and India, and is practically the king of written content creation through books. Today, I'm here at his office bringing all the insights to help you get started. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja.
Cushy, thank you so much.
comfy,
Yeah,
and forget that the cameras are round. This is the kind of stuff that folks that direct adult content tell their actors.
Forget the cameras around, right?
Forget
Do what you gotta do.
Anyway, so what's interesting, Gaurav, is that, back in the day, I used to write this blog. It was called My Life is a Jalebi. It was kind of like Malgudi days, but for a Punjabi family and someone who's grown up in the 90s in Delhi. Okay, so a lot of anecdotes from my grandmother and my relationship with my grandmother and the kind of games we would play in school and the kind of humor we would enjoy and jokes and all of that. And over the years, it possibly had over 200 essays. Most of it was humor. Luckily, fortunately for me, I never imagined, but in 2015, it got the Best Humor Blog of India award.
Wow.
Okay. I remember sometime in 2020, before I started doing, putting out content on social media, Aditi, my wife, and I, we sat down and we thought, okay, let's pull out 70 to 80 essays from the blog, which are evergreen, put it in the form of a book, and pitch it to publishing houses. I remember what a hard time I had getting responses from people and someone telling me you can't really do this without an agent. I'm just wondering, today, because I have a bit of a social media presence and audience, it's still easy for me to get in with publishers. But for someone who's really great at his job, wants to write something, how do they even approach publishing houses? And I know the pain of not getting that response and not even getting responses from agents. How does an author go about cracking this?
That's a good question. Publishing is tough. There's no doubt about it, right? And it's tough because of the volume of manuscripts that we receive. And agents are a great way to reach publishing houses because a couple of things happen. You meet an agent, they talk to you about a book, they help you restructure or structure the book. And what an agent will do is, if he or she takes it on, they will send it out to multiple publishers. And by virtue of their relationship and by virtue of the fact that it's coming from an agent, publishers will take
it with credibility?
Yeah.
Okay.
They will take notice, right? Not to say that they will necessarily publish it, but at least the likelihood increases exponentially.
What is the commercial interest of the agent? How much do they keep from? Is it a one-time fee? Is it a percentage
No,
of the
they generally
royalties?
keep a percentage of the royalties. I would suspect it's about 10-15%
Of the royalty.
of the royalties.
So you would say essentially,
And of the advance as well.
okay, so if 15% is the royalty on the retail price of a book for the author, think about 15% will be taken by the agent.
I suspect. I don't have the exact figures, but I would imagine that would be reasonable.
Now, my question is, if the publishing house knows that a majority of my books won't even end up selling 3,000 copies and you don't know which one will, for an author, the advance is, say, the biggest chunk of what
Begin with, yeah.
to begin with that they'd see?
Absolutely.
And when you decide on an advance, typically, what is your expectation about 1,000 copies or 2,000 copies? What do you?
We do not tend to publish books if that is the ambition,
Okay.
right? Again, it's genre specific. So if you have 1,000 copies priced at $12.99, from a value perspective, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's priced high,
Correct.
you're getting value of it. If it's 1,000 copies at $2.99, we're not going to touch it. We're
Correct.
very clear on that. That's one of the conversations I keep having with the editors, is that keep that 3,000 ambition low, pick it well, and be brutal about it.
Got it. So anyone who dreams to be an author someday, you would ideally say that pick a sector or a space where you can build expertise and write non-fiction in that space to be successful as an author that you think they have?
Be very careful what I say here, because I do have
Yeah.
editors across the board, right? But if you are coming from a world of business, say for example, Sarthak, right? You're coming from the world of business. You understand that space. Yes, the likelihood of A, getting published, and the likelihood of success, because you've got credibility already, obviously increases. Now, if your passion is fiction, I'm not going to say don't write it. You might be a fabulous fiction writer. Take a punt.
Self-publish, and that's absolutely fine.
Listen, the beauty of business models today is the barriers to becoming a publisher are very low. So if you've got an opportunity, rather than not publish at all, I do think the publishing business adds a lot of value to the publishing process. Therefore, we still exist. I think if you are left with absolutely no option, absolutely self-publish.
Would you say,
Because-
if someone, I always have this question that if I were to back in 2020, if I had self-published my book, does that absolutely kill the chances of
No,
a publisher picking it up later?
absolutely not. In fact, I've got a book. It's a great question. I've got this book, Warmth, with
Okay.
Singh. He was
Okay.
actually self-published, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken, with Notion. We picked him up.
Okay.
The model with self-publishing is their sales model is we will publish you, but you buy back X, right? And then the author has to do a lot of work on the marketing side to build discoverability.
Correct.
So that is where, that's the tough part of it.
Now, because authors, majority of them may not really make a life-changing sum out of this, do you think writing a book today is 80%, 90% a brand building exercise for authors, or it's adding more to it? I'll tell you why I said that. I was reading about
Because you
this.
said 80, 90%. That's what
I'll
I
tell
said.
you why. Because I heard Guinness, the world record vertical was actually massively loss making. And then they thought that, okay, this is not really a world record repository of sorts, and that's not our business. Our business is marketing. We will tell brands in what category can you easily build a world record through the infrastructure or the moat or the expertise that you have. And then when we give you the certification of having gotten a Guinness World Record, you can use that as a marketing activity to increase your credibility. And I think, do you think publishers would use that lens at some point to say, we've got a certain level of credibility? If someone matches that threshold of bringing that expertise in their quality of writing, this could very well be a marketing activity for them, because most
We already
people
do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we do it. If you've got someone who has already been successful in their particular domain, right? To your point, that's an extension. The book is an extension. Publishers love that because from a marketing, from a discoverability perspective, this person might already have a ready audience. And that's why, you see a lot of publishers picking up bookstagrammers or Instagrammers or whatever else. Why? Because that brand exists. They've got a following. They obviously have things to say which make a lot of sense. That's why they have a following. When you've got someone who unfortunately doesn't have that, but has got a great story, publishers add tremendous value from a perspective of the whole value chain.
That's right.
Now, if you've got a brand as an author that is great at what they do, but they probably are not very good writers, what publishers will do is get them ghostwriters. So they'll take your ideas or the author's ideas, put them into a storyline. That works well.
So I have a question to what you just validated. For example, if a lot of authors today look at it as a branding exercise, that would possibly contribute to their revenue in other ways. For example, getting them speaking gigs or
Yeah.
getting them more business and or them being able to charge a higher price after being a published author for whatever services that they provide. Do you think because an author would love to be placed at the airport, when they get placed at the airport, the publisher can say, okay, your royalties from sales at the airport are probably going to be zero because for you, it's actually contributing to much more in terms of brand building by putting your face on a shelf at the airport than paying you royalties on it. Do you think such a model can exist, or someone could say, I'm giving you so much worth of brand value at the airport that give up on the royalties, and authors should be okay with that?
Would you be okay with that?
I think if someone gives me visibility at the airport for a specific duration as a deliverable, why not?
Now, here's the flip side, right? I run an airport store, paying high rent. I need to make sure what I put on the airport shelf sells. So, as a publisher, you tell the author no royalty, that's fine. As a retailer, why would you take a book if you don't believe it's going to sell and put it on such expensive retail space? Then probably what I would do as a retailer is to say, fine, if you want that book up there, pay me. The other thing is that, not all books resonate at airports because there is a certain type of buyer that will come in. And again, remember, they have limited space. So, from an author perspective, now all authors love to be at airports. That's a given, right? But it's impossible for us to put all books at airport stores because it's limited in terms of space.
That's right.
So the tougher conversations that we're going to be having over time is, and that comes down to target audience, right? To just sit down with the author and say, if this is the target audience, where is the reader? If your reader is not at the airport, then why are we concentrating so much at the airport? Let's go to where the reader is. And that's what a publishing house brings in. That's what a self-publishing platform cannot do.
But do you think AI is removing that competitive advantage? I mean, see, some people say that it's a co-pilot. If you're a smart person, you can use it to be more efficient. But with more efficiency, also comes in the requirement for lesser manpower.
I think to turn around and say, well, AI is going to come in and it's going to completely destroy everything, I just don't believe that fundamentally. The human brain is tremendous, right? Human interactions are required. In our business, creating content is a real people to real people business. Now, yes, AI might come in on processes. It might come in on the copy side, absolutely. So as long as we don't unnecessarily hire, I don't believe AI is going to come in and disrupt what we have. I think what's going to happen is that it will complement what we have.
Sure.
Because if I look at our people cost as a percentage of sales, we are sub 10%. And that is a very healthy number to be.
Absolutely. I do have more questions though. So people have always spoken about the death knell of the publishing industry. They think of you as a traditional business. However, you still think there's a long way to go.
Well, we don't think of ourselves as a traditional business, right? I think we think of ourselves as a business which has impact. We support discourse. We create and discover narratives. You name a particular genre, Penguin Random House has published in it. We do over 15,000 titles globally every year. We have over 300 homes for publishing, which is what we call imprints. Year on year, we've had volume growth, we've had value growth, north of 10%.
Globally, north of 10%?
I'm talking about India, right?
Really?
Yeah.
But
Now,
are you
for a
talking about
traditional
books
business-
or there's something else that's
No,
contributing?
it's books. Now, within books, there are different growth categories or genres. So, business, for example, is a tremendous growth category for us. Self-help, spirituality, we were talking about that earlier. Tremendous growth category for us. We are growing at 20%.
What are you saying?
So, the narrative that readership is falling, I don't agree to. Now, yes, is the business difficult, it's a very complicated business. And the reason it's a complicated business is, so if you take India, for example, we publish 300 new books every year. Globally, it's 15,000, right? Each book is a mini microcosm of a startup because it's a new product that comes in, it's a new voice, it's a different genre.
So I have a lot of questions here, okay?
Yeah.
I would first want to go like all macro and understand from you. You mentioned that the industry is growing at upwards of 10% per annum. People reading books, I could not have imagined it. So I really want to understand what is it that India reads and what kind of books sell the most in India. So you mentioned the number of imprints. I'd love to know what contributes the most in terms of revenue, in terms of unit sales. And if today someone has to write for India, what genre would give them the maximum amount of readership or profit?
I'll just kind of go back one step, right? The beauty about my country is that we have 1.5 billion storytellers. Indians love to tell stories. You walk the streets, you travel the trains, there's always a story being told, right? What do? You tell stories. You tell stories about numbers of businesses. You tell stories about startups and founders and how they have thought about thinking about their business. We view the opportunity for storytelling as immense. Now, let's come to the business. Let's look at the addressable market. Let's say 20% is our addressable audience on that. That's about 30 million at this point in time. Now, at 30 million, assuming if these are the readers and they even read 2 to 3 books a year, that's 100 million potential for sale. That's the way I view it.
Okay, so let's think fiction, non-fiction. What do you think the here and the now of your numbers of fiction, non-fiction, what would be the percentage split like?
70-30?
With 70 being non-fiction?
Non-fiction.
Okay. Now within non-fiction, what do you think is the biggest seller?
Spirituality
Is number
and
one?
self-help would
Yeah.
go hand in hand. Business would be very close.
Okay.
And then
So
you have the autobiographies and the biographies.
so what do you think the percentage split would be like? I'm just thinking that if someone has to map the market, where's my highest chance of selling a book? Or what is it that the market demands?
So on the adult side, of the 70%, I'd put about 20-25% on spirituality,
Okay.
another 20-25% on self-help,
Okay.
about 10-15% on business, and then everything else. So literally, these three segments could make up anywhere from 40 to 50% of sale at this point in time.
What states in India do you think buy the most number of books? Apart from the usual metros, I'm assuming 60-70% of the market would just be the metros. That's my assumption, but is that correct?
At this point in time, you're absolutely right. So again, a few things. If I go region-wise, the north is about 40%. The south, I think, is about 32%, followed by the west, followed by the east. And that's also primarily market size. So the north actually is the biggest market, English language. Hindi, of course, you've got the Hindi belt, so that's where it sells. The online world has opened up the opportunity to supply to tier 2, tier 3, which is fantastic. And I think that's where you see the incremental growth coming from. Concurrently, what the online world has also done is they have opened up the world of piracy,
And
which
in terms
drive
of
sales.
in terms of distribution channels, like how much would you say happens online? How much happens at the airports? How much happens at, say, chain bookstores?
So online has come down.
Really?
Post-COVID, it was about 55 is what we had estimated. Our sales reflect about 40-45% online, 55% offline. Offline, majority of it would be, as I said, chains and retail. Airports are a very important segment for certain kinds of books, business being one of them, children's also being one of them. And I wish they would make airport stores more affordable because books are a low price product. You don't get substantial margins on a per square foot basis
That's right.
with books.
That's
But
right.
on a per square foot basis, these bookstores are being charged. I mean, I hate to say they're being fleeced, right?
But see, like you run a business, I think they run a business where they're renting out space and it's really expensive. I
But
mean,
look at models. Then why look at deferring models? Because if bookstores flourish, their spaces will flourish.
Yeah. So now that you've
Building a business.
now that you've spoken about margins, I think you said that Penguin India publishes about 300 titles in a year.
New title.
New titles. That means 25 each month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost a new book a day.
Almost a new book a day, which is a fabulous number when I think about how much time goes into writing a book. But in the broad scheme of things, 300 seems like a very filtered number. It's almost like it's a success rate or a selection rate, which is much more stringent than maybe the Harvard Business School selection rate or the Y Combinator selection rate. So, one, what's going to be your selection process? How do you pick authors that we want to work with this person or not? What I'm also seeing a lot in the publishing industry is you see a lot of celebrities, influencers writing books. From a business perspective, I think it definitely helps Penguin. But you also pick people who don't really have a digital distribution today. How do you go about doing that selection? And then what is the math or economics on this should be able to sell this much when it's a profitable venture?
So the process would be a manuscript comes in, and different editors have different expertise, right? They will look at, they will read the book, and they will get a sense of the writing, they will get a sense of the storyline, and a lot of it actually has to tie in with the editor's sensibilities because it's such a personalized process. And that's where we rely on the editors to say, you know what, the story is great, or the writing is fabulous, or it's a subject that we think will resonate, or it's a subject that is relevant. We'd like to publish this. And the editor is the person who will take that first call, nobody else coming in. Of course, we lend ourselves to sales at that point in time because they are the ones who are front facing to the market, and then they estimate a sales number. So, for example, you take a book on commercial fiction. It's safe to assume that if you bring up a 400-page book on commercial fiction and you price it at $7.99, it's not going to work. You've outpriced yourself because your target audience for that particular genre probably sits in the $299, $399
That's
rupee
right.
price range.
That's right.
Now, in order to make a $299 rupee price work, the discounts that we as publishers give to the market could range from 40 to 55%. Generally speaking, we make an allocation of about 25% coming back from the market as unsold stock. Your PPB, which is your paper, print, and bind, and these are just averages. So they
Yeah,
could
so
be
paper, print, and bind
is
would
about 25%
is about 25% of the selling price
of the retail price.
of the retail price of the book. So if something is selling at say
$400.
400 bucks, 100 rupees is the
Generally
paper,
speaking,
printing, and binding
on
cost.
paperback. On hardback, it'll increase because your hardback costs are
Higher.
So it might go up to 30%, 32%,
Okay.
whatever that is.
Okay.
Right?
So that's a 25 to 30% cost in just producing the
Book.
book.
That's it.
So you said roughly 50% is the margin that you leave for the distributors as well as the retailers.
Yeah, on the average.
Which means you would roughly have about 20% is what you would make on a book, out of which you would also have to give to the author as royalties, right?
The author royalty of the retail price is about 15%. And then, of course, you've got distribution sitting at whatever, 4 or 5%. So, net for our business, because it's 30% original publishing and 70% distribution, if we come in at about 15%, we would have done very well. But generally speaking, we won't. We'll come in a little lower.
So what you're saying is if 30% goes into producing the book, 50% is the margin that you leave for distributors or retailers. That leaves you with about 20-25%.
Yeah.
Out of which 15% on the retail price
On the
goes to
retail
the
price, yeah.
goes to the author. That means you have just about 5-10% margin on each book.
Yeah.
So are you saying the author practically makes more than the publisher on
So
each
that's
book?
where scale comes in, right?
Yeah.
So the more we sell, because our fixed costs
So your margins improve.
So because
Got
our
it.
fixed costs are what our fixed costs are. That's a one-time cost.
Got
The
it.
moment your fixed costs are taken care of, then you're doing well. The challenge we have in our industry, and this is probably across the board, right, is predicting that sale number.
So tell me something. I read this stat somewhere. I don't know how true this is, and maybe you can validate it. That the world over, there's 60,000 titles published a year, new titles, out of which 30,000 sell less than 12 copies each. If you sell about 2,000 copies, you're in the 95 percentile. If you sell 5,000 copies, you're in the 98 percentile, top 2% of the books sold. One, is that true in terms of how you look at your portfolio? Is it similar for Penguin, or are the
So
conversion rates
I'll
better?
talk about India. Um, the average sale of a book in India is probably around 3,000, give or take,
Really?
for us.
So, which is why if you sell 5,000, you're like a bestseller.
Predominantly, in my view, you're a bestseller.
It's a surprisingly low bench. I mean, 5,000 copies is nothing, especially today in terms of digital. When there are digital products being sold, I mean, 5,000 one would expect to do in a month.
Not even, right? But it's tough. And that's why we as publishers have to take out as diverse a range of books as possible, because we really cannot predict which one's going to sell 100. So that 100,000 actually finances a big chunk of the investments we make back. And remember, from that margin, we're also reinvesting into the business.
So, I was hearing this from my experience working with some founders in the fashion space. And they say that there is a celebrity designer in India, does amazing work in the wedding wear category. And they themselves are assumed to produce their own copies, which actually sells in Chandni Chowk at a fifth of the price, because they realize that this is going to get copied anyway. From a business perspective, it's a great idea. And I think in books, because there is so much piracy, and I know that because a lot of times when I see reviews of my books on Amazon, and people who've given 1-star reviews are mostly those who would say the paper quality or the cover quality was not very good. And we know that they have received a pirated version. Do you think it's okay for us to print it cheaply and tap into the network of people who actually sell at traffic lights? Because if it picks up there, it will also lead to better sales for you online. Would you consider going down that route?
So again, I think a few things, right?
I know
In this
you can give me a
particular-
politically correct
No,
answer.
I'll give you I'm very open.
Yeah,
right?
I
you'll
want a
get you'll
business
hear it from
like.
me. Absolutely.
So you can tell me this is what Penguin would not do for reasons of principles, but from a business perspective, do you think it makes sense? I would be absolutely okay with someone publishing my or printing my book in cheap paper, selling it for say $100 on the traffic light. I'd say as an author, it's adding to my brand, and I guarantee that it's adding to more visibility of my book, which is why my publisher will eventually benefit.
So let me start with the example you gave. It's the IP owner that is segmenting his or her market and differentiating product and price to reach the consumer, right?
Correct.
So that's not piracy. I looked at selling at traffic lights years back.
You did?
I did, years back. This is not something new. But I was told we're not allowed to do it because the law doesn't allow. I think one of the challenges for the publishing industry is that we are not an industry. That in itself is a challenge because there's no motivation for people that make rules to stem piracy. Now, it's not, look at the various elements that go into publishing. You've got the author who worked damn hard to create their IP. Why should their IP be sold by a third party when the author gets no revenue from it? It's just fundamentally wrong. You've got the publisher who takes substantial risk to bring books to market. We lose revenue. It's fundamentally wrong. Then you've got the ancillary businesses. You've got the printers, right? You've got retailers that are losing out. Then you take that further down, that's legitimate livelihoods that are getting impacted. Why would we not want to be organized and recognized? Why not? We should be. I don't, it just baffles me. I don't get it.
To that, while I was going to come to this later, recently over the past 1 year, a lot of people have been quite upset with Instagram, saying that it used to be a platform where we would share images of our lives with our friends. And now that use case is completely gone because it's just short form content. And what if we want to share images with our friends, but the platform is not prioritizing it? And we want to be able to do it. And people saying we want to be able to put long form content on Instagram to share it with the world because that's what we like to do. But the platform, why is it curbing this? And recently, the CEO of Instagram, I believe Adam Mosseri, he came and he said, we are not disincentivizing you to do long form content or to post images, but the consumer behavior is such that automatically short form video gets a lot more engagement. And if it's getting engagement just to retain people on the platform, it is that's where the market is going. Unfortunately, we are at a time in mankind where dopamine highs are so high for humanity in general because of the internet, that if earlier your pleasure was a scale of 0 to 10 and 9 was reading a book that would engross you, today watching a short form video gives you a high of 50. And once you've experienced it, you suddenly realize that it's so much tougher to read a book. It's so much easier to access newer content on short form video, that a lot of businesses are now realizing you can't fight this, you can't idolize this. We will have to find a way to make the same knowledge more accessible on short form, to increase discoverability and to get to our consumers who, if they like us on short form, would eventually come and maybe also want to dive deeper in the form of a book. So, do you think the publishing industry is kind of experimenting in that format? Are you seeing more of those a chapter a page kind of books selling a lot more?
The beauty about book publishing, and I say it again, right, is it allows people different content at different levels of readership. Why have you written a book? Maybe it's because you wanted to extend the brand, your brand. Maybe you just had a lot to say. But you, as somebody who's highly successful in this new world, have come back to writing a book. And whatever your motivations are, fact is you've written a book because you do feel there are people out there. So I think fundamentally, publishers should continue publishing at the baseline. It's a pyramid. Baseline is this is what we do. This is the value we bring to people who are interested in reading long form content. Now, as we go up over time, should we experiment? I think we should, and probably we already are. But remember, printing a 2-page, 3-page book is not going to work. Economics just won't make it work.
Correct.
Ebooks haven't taken off in India. Globally, they've actually come down. Audio is taking off now. So formats become very important.
So audiobook is something that you guys do, audiobooks?
Yeah, absolutely. Our books get converted to audio. And globally, we've seen audio as a market's increasing. E is pretty much flattened out at 20%. India at sub 7-8%. Will we want to experiment with formats? We probably will. How are we going to do it? At this point, I have no idea.
Do you like reading fiction, non-fiction?
I'm a non-fiction reader.
Think of 3 books which have really like changed your perspective on something. You're like, man, what a book. Forget Penguin or not or whatever it is.
So, The Fountainhead. More recently, I really suggest Mindset. And there is another book called Design Thinking.
And if you had to gift me a book, you've gifted me quite a few already, I know. But if you had to gift me one book, like thoughtfully, which you think would add value to my life?
I would give you something that I'm recently reading as well, and I would give you Mindset. And I'll tell you why. You influence so many lives. And I know you're a numbers person and you love numbers. But life is more than numbers. Numbers are always the result. And mindset shifts are about shaping oneself for everything that is to come. I do believe in that. And I think that fits in beautifully with the millions of lives that you speak to every day.
Thank you. I do have the book. I haven't picked it up to read yet. I'm 100% going back to it when I get back home.
And I don't think we published it. It was actually published by Ishad, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong, but definitely worth a read.
Wonderful.
As an entrepreneur, when you make content on social media, it may project you as an influencer and not necessarily an expert. However, even though a book may get you much lesser visibility than one viral reel, the impact on your personal brand, your business, as well as credibility can be exponentially higher through a book, which elevates you to the position of an industry expert and a thought leader. I'll be making you meet a lot more of my friends from the industry in future episodes, helping you become a much better entrepreneur. Stay tuned. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja.